Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête here on France 24. Our guest this week is Narges Mohammadi. She's a well-known women's rights advocate in Iran. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2023, and she is with us from her home in Tehran, Iran. Thank you very much for being with us. You're currently on leave from jail. First of all, how do you feel physically and psychologically?
After my surgery, I stayed in the hospital for 48 hours. It was a major operation. They removed a mass from my bone before doing a bone graft. They were supposed to let me spend the convalescence period elsewhere, but the prosecutor ordered me sent back to prison. So I went back to prison 48 hours after my operation, and I was in prison for 22 days. Now I'm on leave, my health is starting to improve, and on a psychological level too, I'm doing well.
The regime has for years been prosecuting you because of your advocacy work. Can you tell us what is your legal situation right now between all those trials and prison sentences?
To date, I have been tried 9 times, and I have been sentenced to prison terms intermittently as a result of these court decisions. This is my 10th year of imprisonment, and I believe that the number of cases they have kept open at the prosecutor's office will ultimately be processed. But I still have about 10 years left on my sentences, and I'm going to have to go back to prison.
Evin prison has a sinister reputation. Can you describe us the living conditions there, and also whether you've been victim of physical or psychological torture there?
Evin prison has 2 sections. There's a section that contains solitary confinement cells, where the conditions of detention are unbearable. Generally speaking, the presence of a human being in solitary confinement, given the conditions of both detention and interrogation, constitutes an example of white torture. There are psychological and emotional pressures that are unbearable and can break a human being. I have been in solitary confinement 4 times. 3 times I was in solitary confinement in the High Security Section 209 of Evin prison, and once I was held in the military detention center of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, known as Eshkhat Abad. And I had to endure a lot of pressure. They bring you there to inflict psychological and moral torture on you, and to break you, and to get what they want. The rest of the time I was in general population, in Zanjan prison, in Karchak prison, with ordinary prisoners. And in Evin prison, I was in the section reserved for political prisoners. The conditions of detention are different there, and it was from this section that I was released on temporary leave.
You're not afraid to grant interviews like this to international media, address international forums, and so on when you're out of jail. Aren't you taking a major risk by doing this?
Well, these interviews, or my interviews with international institutions, are bound to have consequences. But the reality is that I have been tried 9 times, and each time these trials have taken place because of my insistence on respecting human rights and defending freedom of expression and opinion. And I think I will continue this work, and I am not afraid. Life has the same meaning for me whether I am on one side of a prison wall or the other. And it is about resisting until victory and until the achievement of human rights and democracy.
Does the fact that you were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in a way protects you from the authorities, or on the contrary, does it make them more aggressive towards you?
Since I won the Nobel Peace Prize, I think that there has been more awareness of my situation. I have had many charges made against me because of the statements I made from prison. They've tried to silence me. They've wanted to prevent me from making statements. Or when I receive questions from journalists and the media, they try to prevent me from submitting the replies that I prepare. But I do not stop. Consequently, my telephone was cut off for over a year. When I arrived in prison, I was unable to communicate by phone. And even when my father was sick, they didn't let me talk to him or visit him in the hospital. My father passed away, and they didn't let me attend his funeral. What I'm trying to say is that in a country like Iran, with a repressive government like the Islamic Republic, I think that winning the Nobel Peace Prize has made the situation more sensitive.
Have you been offered by the regime the possibility to leave Iran, and are you determined to stay in your native country?
I have been asked many times to leave Iran. I remember when Ali and Kiana were very young. They were about 5 years old, and their father had left Iran for France. Security agents were pressuring me to leave the country, to cross the border illegally, because they did not want to give me the authorization to leave the country, nor a passport, and I resisted. I was in solitary confinement, and they came back to me and insisted that I leave Iran illegally. And even with Ali and Kiana, but I did not accept. I was severely punished, but I stayed in Iran, and I have no intention of leaving Iran. I am determined to continue fighting alongside the Iranian people.
Narges Mohammadi, do you think the regime has been able to stifle the protest movement sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini at the hands of the police, or do you think that under the surface it is still alive?
I believe that the Women, Life, Freedom movement is still alive. This movement continues to exist with force. It is powerful. It is true that this movement does not take a single form. Don't expect, for example, to see demonstrations in the streets of the country. This is indeed not the case. However, it takes different forms, and it continues its existence in many creative ways. I believe that the actions of Parastu Ahmadi and Ahu Daryai are the continuation of this same movement. You see its effects. You see its impact, both inside and outside the country, which gives it a true international scope. You see, the decisions made by the government, such as the suspension of the law on the veil and chastity, which was not just a government decision, but rather the result of their fear of confronting the people, because they know that the people are resisting, thanks to the Women, Life, Freedom movement. And the movement continues its actions, and you can see the level of this resistance everywhere in the country, among teachers, workers, women, all levels of society, even pensioners. These are signs that demonstrate the power of the Women, Life, Freedom movement.
Why is the issue of the mandatory veil for women so important to you and for the regime?
I think that the principle of the mandatory veil was important to the government because from its earliest days, this government sought to dominate and repress society. And the obligation to wear a veil was a crucial pressure point in every vital element of society, in every place, every city, every village, in the workplace, in the universities, in every public and private space. I think they were aware of how this principle of the mandatory veil worked as a tool of domination. And I don't think they were seeking to impose just a religious rule, or as they say, that they wanted to protect security and chastity. I think they just wanted to repress society. Because if they can dominate half of society, this subjugation would allow them to bring all of society under their domination. And that was their goal. And women have been aware of this. They resisted starting on March 8, 1979, and they continue today through the Women Life Freedom Movement. Women have demonstrated through their resistance that they will not submit to the government's subjugation, because women know that their subjugation is the strategic point, the very heart of the battle. They fight against this authoritarian regime using the same tool.
Narges Mohammadi, your immediate family lives in exile. Can you communicate with them, and how difficult is it to cope for you?
This year, I was in prison, and for the 10th time, I celebrated Ali and Kiana's birthday from prison. At that time, Ali and Kiana were no longer in Iran, and I did not see them. Many times, my phone calls were cut off. They would not let me speak with my children, Ali and Kiana, despite my many requests. I asked to call them and was systematically refused. But since my temporary release, I have been able to talk to them, and I hope that one day I will be able to hold my children in my arms in my own country, and I live in this hope.
Narges Mohammadi, thank you very much for being our guest here on France 24 from Tehran in Iran. And thank you all for watching this interview, taped in unusual conditions for obvious security reasons.